A racist principal thought he could silence a black boy by suspending him, but he didn't count on one thing: a viral video that revealed the truth. What started as injustice in a classroom turned into a movement that forced the school to confront its racism. Stay until the end to see how this boy's courage changed everything. The bright morning sun shone through the windows of Oak Ridge High School. But inside the walls, a storm was brewing. Jalen Carter, a quiet but confident 16-year-old, sat in the principal's office, his fists clenched on his lap. Across the desk, Principal Edward Mills peered at him over thin wire glasses, his expression cold and judgmental. "Do you know why you're here?" Mills asked, his voice clipped and unforgiving. "Yes, sir," Jalen replied, his voice steady, though anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. "You defied your teacher," Mills continued, leaning back in his chair. "When you were asked to take off that Black Lives Matter t-shirt during history class, you refused. That kind of behavior disrupts the learning environment and is unacceptable here." Jalen took a deep breath, keeping his tone respectful but firm. "Sir, I wasn't disrupting anything. I was sitting quietly and listening. The shirt isn't against the dress code. It's about equality." Mills narrowed his eyes. "Equality, you say? This isn't a place for political statements. You're suspended for 3 days, effective immediately. Maybe that will teach you to follow the rules." Jalen's stomach sank, but he refused to let his emotions show. "With all due respect, sir, this feels more like silencing than discipline." "Watch your tone," Mills snapped. "This is my school and you'll follow my rules. Now, leave." Jalen stood, fighting back the flood of emotions threatening to break through. As he walked out, his mother, Cynthia Carter, stood waiting near the office door. Her face was a mixture of concern and quiet fury. She knew all too well the kind of prejudices her son faced, but seeing them wielded so openly by someone in power sent her pulse racing. "Suspended?" she asked as Jalen approached. He nodded. "For wearing a shirt, Mom." Cynthia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll deal with this, Jalen. Don't let them break your spirit." As they walked out of the school, Jalen spotted his best friend Leo waiting by the bike racks. "I'll catch up later," Jalen called out, his voice tinged with frustration. Leo hesitated, but nodded. "You good?" "Not really," Jalen admitted. "But I will be." That evening, Jalen sat at his desk, staring at his laptop screen. His suspension didn't feel right. It felt targeted, unfair, and most of all, wrong. With his mum's encouragement, he wrote down every detail of what happened. Then he did something that would change everything. He recorded a video. Sitting in his room, Jalen spoke directly to the camera. "Hi, my name is Jalen Carter, and today I was suspended from Oak Ridge High for wearing this shirt." He held up the Black Lives Matter t-shirt. "The principal said it was disruptive, but I didn't say a word in class. I think what's really disruptive is trying to silence a student for expressing a belief in equality." Jalen's voice cracked slightly, but he pushed on. "This isn't just about me. This is about how schools handle important conversations. We should be talking about racism, not punishing people who bring it up. If you agree, please share this video. Let's make them listen." He uploaded the video to his social media accounts, unsure of what to expect. By the time he woke up the next morning, it had already been shared hundreds of times. The next morning, Jalen woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. Groggy, he reached over to his nightstand, blinking at the bright screen. His notifications were endless: likes, comments, and shares. His video had gone viral overnight. "Jalen," his mum's voice called from downstairs. "Come here, now." Still rubbing sleep from his eyes, Jalen stumbled into the kitchen. Cynthia stood at the counter, her phone in hand. Her expression was a mix of pride and worry. "Do you know how many views this has?" she asked, showing him her screen. The video had over 100,000 views, with comments pouring in from all over the country. "This is crazy," Jalen stammered, his heart racing. "It's not just crazy," Cynthia said, her voice firm. "It's powerful. People are listening, Jalen. But with attention like this, you need to be prepared. Not everyone will support you." Jalen nodded, though he couldn't shake the excitement buzzing in his chest. For the first time, he felt like his voice truly mattered. By the afternoon, local news stations were covering the story. Reporters camped outside the school, trying to get statements from Principal Mills, who refused to speak on camera. Meanwhile, Jalen's classmates and teachers began sharing their own thoughts online. Leo sent him a text. "Dude, the whole school's talking about it. Some teachers are mad, but a lot of students are on your side. Even some parents are posting about how unfair it is." Jalen smiled faintly, but his stomach knotted as he scrolled through the comments. Most were supportive, praising his bravery and calling out the school's actions. But others were harsh. Kids shouldn't bring politics into the classroom. Another case of playing the race card. This is why schools are falling apart. Lack of discipline. Jalen's hands trembled slightly as he read the negativity. He put his phone down, staring at the wall. Cynthia sat beside him. "It's hard, isn't it?" she asked gently. Jalen nodded. "I knew not everyone would agree, but it's still tough to see." She wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You can't let those voices drown out the good ones. Look at all the people who believe in you. Focus on that. You're starting something important, Jalen." Meanwhile, the school board found itself under mounting pressure. Emails and phone calls from parents, community members, and even activists flooded their offices, demanding action. The story had gained the attention of national media outlets, and the hashtag number Justice for Jalen trended on social media. Principal Mills, however, dug in his heels. In a brief statement, he doubled down on his decision. "Our school has rules to maintain order and focus. This was not about race, but about enforcing our dress code policy." The response only fueled the outrage. Students organized a walkout in solidarity with Jalen, planning to leave their classes at noon the next day and gather outside the school. That evening, Cynthia sat across from Jalen at the kitchen table, both of them surrounded by stacks of emails and messages of support. "There's a rally tomorrow," she said. "The local NHACP chapter wants to join the walkout and make a statement." Jalen's eyes widened. "I didn't think it would get this big." Cynthia smiled softly. "Movements start small, but they grow when people see courage. You've given them that, Jalen." As the walkout approached, Jalen felt a mix of nerves and determination. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every student who had been silenced, every person who had felt the sting of prejudice. On the morning of the walkout, he stood outside the school with his mom, watching students gather. Hundreds of them spilled out of the doors, holding signs that read, "Equality for all" and "Our voices matter." Local news crews captured the moment, their cameras focused on the sea of young faces standing united. Jalen took the megaphone handed to him by a student leader and stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We're here today," he began, his voice strong, "because silence isn't an option. When one of us is silenced, all of us lose. This is about justice, not just for me, but for everyone who believes in equality." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy filling the air. But as Jalen spoke, he noticed Principal Mills watching from the school steps, his arms crossed, his face tight with anger. Jalen knew the battle was far from over. The energy from the walkout lingered like a spark, ready to ignite change. The rally outside Oak Ridge High was the talk of the town, but not everyone saw it as a step forward. By the next morning, the backlash began in full force. Principal Mills, feeling cornered by the media and community pressure, held a press conference outside the school. Flanked by school board members, he painted himself as a misunderstood authority figure, simply enforcing policy. "This school has always been a place of learning and respect," Mills declared to the cameras. "We cannot allow disruptions to derail the education of our students." The decision to suspend Jalen Carter was not about race, but about maintaining order in our classrooms. His words were met with immediate criticism online, where clips of the walkout were trending. A particularly damning video showed Mills glaring at the protesting students while they chanted, "Equality for all." Viewers latched onto his disdainful expression, calling it proof of his bias. Meanwhile, Jalen was struggling to stay grounded as the story spiraled further. His face was on the local news, and reporters even showed up at his house, knocking on the door. "I just wanted to speak out." Jalen told his mom during breakfast, scrolling through the latest headlines. I didn't think it'd turn into this circus. Cynthia placed a hand over his. Movements are messy, Jalen. But what you're doing matters. Don't let the noise drown out your purpose. That afternoon, Jalen received a direct message on social media from an unexpected source, a fellow student, Maya Torres. She was quiet and shy, known mostly for her photography skills in the yearbook club. Hey Jalen, the message read. I saw what happened to you, and I think I have something you should see. Can we talk after school? Curious and slightly wary, Jalen agreed. They met at the local library, where Maya nervously handed him a USB drive. I was working on a project for the yearbook last month, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. I left my camera rolling by accident during a staff meeting. I think it caught something important. Jalen's heart raced as he plugged the USB into his laptop. The video showed Principal Mills speaking to a group of teachers, his tone casual, yet chilling. This whole equality movement is getting out of hand, Mills said, leaning back in his chair. We don't need distractions in this school, especially not from kids who don't know their place. If they want to stir up trouble, we'll handle it. Jalen's jaw tightened. The video was undeniable proof of Mills's bias. Maya looked at him nervously. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't think anyone would believe me, but then all this happened. Thank you, Maya, Jalen said, his voice filled with gratitude. This could change everything. That night, Jalen uploaded the video to his social media accounts with the caption, "The truth about what's happening at Oak Ridge High." Within hours, it was shared by major activist accounts and even picked up by national news outlets. The video sent shockwaves through the community, sparking renewed calls for Mills' resignation. But the backlash also grew more personal. Jalen started receiving hateful messages, some accusing him of fabricating the video, others filled with outright threats. One anonymous commenter wrote, "You're tearing this school apart for attention. You'll regret this." Cynthia watched her son's resolve falter as the messages piled up. "You don't have to do this alone," she told him. "There are people who can help." The next day, representatives from the local NAACP chapter visited Jalen and Cynthia at their home. Their leader, Mr. Reynolds, a calm yet commanding man, spoke with conviction. "Jalen, you've shown tremendous courage," he said, "but this isn't just your fight anymore. We want to stand with you." Mr. Reynolds explained that they were organizing a town hall to address systemic issues in the school district. Jalen would have the opportunity to speak directly to community leaders, parents, and students. Jalen hesitated. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. What if I say the wrong thing?" "You've already said the right thing," Mr. Reynolds replied. "That's why people are listening." As the town hall approached, the pressure mounted. Principal Mills's allies on the school board tried to discredit the video, calling it out of context. Jalen's supporters, however, doubled down, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment at the school. On the night of the town hall, the community center was packed. Parents, students, teachers, and media outlets filled every seat. Jalen sat backstage, his hands trembling as he clutched his speech. "You okay, baby?" Cynthia asked, squeezing his shoulder. "I'm nervous," he admitted. "What if I mess up?" Cynthia smiled. "You've got this, Jalen. Speak your truth, and they'll listen." When his name was called, Jalen stepped onto the stage, the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. He took a deep breath and began. "My name is Jalen Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "And I'm here tonight because I believe schools should be a place for learning, not a place where voices are silenced." The crowd listened intently as Jalen recounted his experience and called for accountability. Principal Mills' words on that video weren't just about me. They were about every student who's ever been told they don't belong. It's time for that to change. By the time he finished, the audience erupted in applause. But as Jalen looked out at the sea of faces, he noticed something unexpected. Principal Mills standing in the back, his expression unreadable. The air outside the town hall buzzed with conversations and debates as attendees spilled onto the streets. Inside, Jalen sat backstage with his mom and Mr. Reynolds, trying to process the evening's events. The applause from his speech still echoed in his mind, but the sight of Principal Mills in the crowd, left an uneasy feeling in his chest. "Did you see him?" Jalen asked, breaking the silence. "Mills?" Mr. Reynolds nodded grimly. "Oh, we saw him. He knows his time's running out." Jalen exhaled deeply. "I just don't get it." He looked angry, but also like he was planning something. "He's grasping at straws, baby," Cynthia said. "Bullies like him hate being exposed. But remember, we've got the truth on our side." The next morning, the fallout from the town hall hit like a tidal wave. Clips of Jalen's speech were everywhere, and the local news aired segments praising his courage and calling for change at Oak Ridge High. Parents came forward with more stories, detailing years of racially charged comments and unfair disciplinary actions under Mills' leadership. But the pressure didn't stop Mills from fighting back. That afternoon, the school sent out an email to parents claiming that the video of Mills's meeting had been doctored and accusing Jalen of spreading misinformation. The email also stated that Jalen's suspension would stand, as his actions had disrupted the school's environment. Jalen read the email aloud in disbelief. "They're doubling down. Even with the video out there, they're still saying I'm lying." "It's fear," Mr. Reynolds said. "They're losing control of the narrative and they're scared. That's why they're lashing out." The email backfired spectacularly. Students were outraged, and parents flooded the school board with calls demanding Mills's resignation. A petition titled "Remove Principal Mills" gained over 50,000 signatures in less than 24 hours. Later that week, Jalen received an unexpected message from a teacher at the school, Mr. Edwards. Known as one of the few black educators on staff, he had always been supportive of Jalen, but kept a low profile due to the administration's hostile environment. "Jalen," the message read, "I've stayed quiet for too long. It's time for me to speak up. There's something I need you to see." That evening, Mr. Edwards met Jalen and Cynthia at a local diner, his expression tense but determined. He pulled out a folder filled with documents, emails, memos, and disciplinary records from the school. "These are internal records I've been keeping for years," Edwards said. "They show how Mills has disproportionately targeted black and Latino students for suspensions and detentions. It's all here. Proof of his bias." Jalen flipped through the documents, his chest tightening as the patterns became glaringly clear. Cynthia placed a hand over her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. "This is what we need," Jalen said, his voice resolute. "We can't let him get away with this." The next day, Jalen and Cynthia, along with Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Edwards, presented the documents to the school board during an emergency meeting. The room was packed with parents, students, and reporters, the tension palpable. As Jalen stood before the board, he held up one of the records. "This isn't just about a t-shirt," he said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "This is about years of discrimination and silencing. How many more students need to be hurt before something changes?" The board members shifted uncomfortably, their faces tight. Some looked genuinely moved, while others seemed determined to avoid his gaze. Principal Mills sat at the far end of the room, his jaw clenched, his face red with anger. "This is a smear campaign," he said, his voice trembling with frustration. "This boy and his so-called supporters are tearing this school apart." "No, Principal Mills," Cynthia said, rising to her feet. "You did that. You created a culture where our children are afraid to speak, and now you're angry that they finally found their voice." The room erupted in applause, drowning out Mills's attempts to respond. The meeting lasted late into the night, with parents and students taking turns at the microphone to share their experiences. By the end, the school board announced that Mills would be placed on administrative leave pending an independent investigation. Jalen's supporters cheered, but he knew this was just the beginning. "It's not over yet," he told his mom as they left the meeting. "We still have to make sure they follow through." The weeks following the school board meeting were a whirlwind. News of Principal Mills being placed on leave spread like wildfire, making national headlines. The investigation into his actions and the school's culture of bias brought a wave of hope to the students and families of Oak Ridge High. But the fight was far from over. Jalen found himself at the center of a movement he hadn't expected to lead. Interviews, community meetings, and social media campaigns consumed his days. His classmates started calling him the voice of Oak Ridge, a nickname that made him both proud and slightly embarrassed. "Jalen, I'm serious," Leo said one day as they walked home from the store. "You should run for student council or something. You're basically already leading the school anyway." Jalen laughed. "I don't know about all that. I just want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." The investigation unearthed even more troubling details about Mills's tenure as principal. Records revealed a clear pattern of disproportionately harsh punishments for Black and Latino students. Teachers came forward anonymously to share stories of Mills dismissing their concerns about racism in the classroom. The findings were damning. Finally, on a chilly Friday morning, the school board called a press conference. Jalen, his mother, and Mr. Reynolds attended, along with dozens of students and parents who had supported the movement. A board member stepped up to the podium, her expression serious. "After a thorough investigation, we have found that Principal Edward Mills violated the principles of equity and fairness that this school district stands for. Effective immediately, he has been terminated from his position." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Jalen exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Cynthia squeezed his hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "You did it, baby," she whispered. The board also announced a new initiative, a district-wide equity and inclusion task force to address systemic issues in all schools. Community members, teachers, and students, including Jalen, were invited to participate. Over the following months, Jalen's life began to settle into a new normal. The attention from the media waned, but the impact of his actions remained. At Oak Ridge High, the atmosphere felt different. The task force implemented changes, including bias training for staff, revamped disciplinary policies, and the creation of a student-led diversity council. One day, as Jalen walked through the school halls, he noticed a group of freshmen huddled around a locker. They wore matching Black Lives Matter pins, quietly discussing a project for the Diversity Council. Jalen smiled to himself, feeling a sense of pride. "Hey, Carter," a voice called. He turned to see Maya Torres jogging up to him, a camera slung over her shoulder. "Hey, Maya," he said. "What's up?" "I'm working on a documentary about everything that happened," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "It's going to show how we turned this school around." "You in?" Jalen chuckled. "I think I've done enough talking for a lifetime. But yeah, count me in." That afternoon, Jalen walked home, the sunlight warm on his face. His mom was waiting on the porch, holding an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, taking it from her. "It came in the mail today," Cynthia said, grinning. Jalen opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. His eyes widened as he read it. It was from a national youth leadership organization, inviting him to speak at their annual conference. "They want me to tell my story," Jalen said, looking up at his mom. "Of course they do," Cynthia said, her voice filled with pride. "You've shown people what one voice can do. Now it's time to show the world." Jalen stared at the letter, his mind racing. He thought back to the day in Principal Mills's office when he'd felt powerless and silenced. Now, that moment felt like a lifetime ago. He smiled. Let's do this. Months turned into years, and Jalen's story became a blueprint for other students standing up against injustice. The video that had started it all became a case study in classrooms, a reminder that change often begins with a single voice refusing to be silenced. Oak Ridge High thrived under new leadership, its halls filled with a renewed sense of unity and purpose, and Jalen, once just a quiet teenager with a t-shirt, grew into a leader whose courage inspired a movement far larger than he ever imagined.